All right, share my screen again. All right, hey guys, welcome back. So we're gonna be going over the, the authentication component that we talked about yesterday that Chad gave a presentation on. We're gonna be adding a login page. I chose to do it for my event calendar, so that's something I'm gonna go through, and then hopefully we can follow along and ask questions as needed. All right, so I actually have my event calendar code up, so let me get to that. So let's give this a run. You can just look at what I have for my event calendar, and then we'll go about adding a login page to it. All right, so got my terminal here. I am a virtual environment, that looks good. I think I have everything installed through my requirements txt, so I think I could just boot up my server and be on my way. Run server, and I gotta get into my directory. All right, cool. My server seems to be up. Let me bring up a web page. Here we are. A little bigger. Okay, so this is my event calendar. I have a couple events created already. So if we, it's pretty standard. We have a summary page, so this lists all of our events. We can click on the event and kind of view it. So this is a detail page. So we have a description here, the title, and then start and end times. We can also update events. So let's say, this is actually going to happen on the 4th of May instead of the 3rd. We could do that. And let's just update the title, May 4th. Update, and yep, everything seems to be updated correctly. If we go there, the dates are updated. So again, pretty standard event calendar. Hopefully you guys were able to implement this. If you want to delete an event, for the way I approach it, I just hit delete and it actually deletes it. I know usually we have a confirm page, so that's definitely good to be safer to confirm it with your user, but in this case, my delete button just deletes the event. All right, and then we can also create new events. So let's just say fun events. And this event's just going to be a lot of fun. We'll just say it starts right now and ends right now. I think my time zones are off, but oh well. All right, so we create a new event. Again, pretty standard CRUD capabilities. So again, we can create new events. We could view existing events or read existing events. We can update events and also delete events. All right, so that's my event calendar that I've coded up here. So our task today is going to be how to add a login page here. So let's actually go about doing that. So again, these are steps we went over yesterday, but just to reiterate the things that we need to do. First, we want to go to our project URL. So that's event calendar and our URLs in that. And we want to add the default authentication paths. So to do that, we will include, we'll add a path. And this can be accounts. And we'll do include Django contrib auth in the URLs. Again, so this will provide us with default paths or default routes that we can get to, but we still need to implement the templates for any page that we want to show. So this will be accounts. Again, you don't have to nest this in our accounts. You can, have a default path. That's actually something I like to do. But if you do modify this, you will have to update some settings. So I'm actually going to go through that example here. So in this case, I'm going to have my default base path be empty for my authentication URLs. All right, so I added that here. Next thing I want to do, I'm going to go to my settings file in my project. All right, so we've all kind of interacted with this. Just want to make sure I'm going to need to probably create a database or recreate it. All right, so in your settings file, you want to add a few items, and this is straight from documentation. So if you actually want to look at documentation, let's quickly Google it. Django login URL should be in there. All right, so I'm going to the settings page, and this has all the settings you could set in your settings file. So the one I want to focus on is authentication. So let's scroll down. There's authentication section. So I'm just going to click off. All right, so there's a few parameters you can add, and there's some defaults that are set if you don't specify. So in this case, one that I want to set is the login URL. So if you notice, the default for this is actually accounts/login. That's the default path. But this relies on the fact that accounts will be your base URL. But notice for my case, I decided not to go that route. So in this case, instead of having accounts here, I want to have something else. Again, this could be donuts, this could be whatever you want it to be. In this case, I'm going to leave it blank. So in my settings file, I'm actually going to add that parameter, login URL. And that's what I'm going to set it to equal something. So in this case, it's going to be pointing to my login route. And we'll talk about how this works in a sec. I could also add a couple other parameters. There's login redirect URL and logout redirect URL. We can see how these work a bit later. So I'll leave those off right now. But in this case, my login URL is just going to go to the login named route. All right, so I add that to my settings. I got to actually add a login page. So again, there's no default templates for a login page. So let's actually go about adding that. So there's a few ways to go about this. I know we've talked about, I think in the example yesterday, we added a templates folder and a registration subfolder in that. Essentially, Django just needs to find some template folder that has registration nested underneath it. So you create that separately. I'm going to do it slightly different just to show you that you can actually have some control over it. So in this case, I'm going to go to my events app folder, and then in my templates, notice I have my events templates. So these are my list page, form page, detail. I'm actually going to create a folder inside this templates folder, and I call it registration. All right, so registration is a, I guess, preset or predefined keyword that Django will look for to find templates for your authentication. So in this case, I created it in my app. Again, I know we did it a little differently yesterday. Either way will work, so long as you have a templates folder that has a registration subfolder underneath it. All right, so I have this registration folder. Inside of that folder, I'm going to create login.html. All right, so let's actually, I'm going to copy what I had in my other HTML file and use that as my base here. All right, so my login page is going to extend my base HTML. So my base HTML has a lot of just like the bare bones, maybe style, default styles, and just like the HTML page structure. I'm going to extend that base HTML file. The title, let's see, will be login page. So let's make it simple. And then the form will be as table. Again, you can use that as P if you want. That makes it as paragraphs. But I like to look at the table. All right, so I think this should be all I need. So again, if you guys remember, you got to use the extends keyword to kind of extend a base template, and then use these blocks to fill in that content. So if I look at my base HTML page, notice I have these blocks. So for my title, I have a block title. For my main content, I have a main content block. So these blocks are what's being filled in with these blocks in my file that I'm extending the base template. All right, so my title should be login page, and then I should have this form for logging in. All right, so let's see what else do we need to do. So we added our URL paths. We added a login template HTML file, and then we specified our login URL in our settings file. So yeah, let's see if they actually get to that page now. So let's bring up my terminal again. I have an error, which is not surprising. I forgot a comma. Save that. All right, notice that your terminal will show errors and automatically reload. For the most part, sometimes you might have to restart your server, but a lot of the times your server will automatically get up and running once all your errors are fixed. So it's kind of nice that you don't want to manually kill your server and restart it all the time. So it looks like my server is good to go. So let me go back to my page. So if I want to go to the login page, I want to go to login. All right, there we go. Here's my simple form. Again, username, password, and a login. Notice my URL. It's my localhost, my port, and then just login. And that is because that's the path I set. You don't have to set it under accounts/login, but if you do opt to use something different aside from accounts, then you need to specify that login URL in your settings file. All right, so currently I have no users in my system. So, I could try to log in. It's going to say, enter a correct username and password. So this is where, again, we're going to use the default Django user object, and we're going to create some objects. So let's go about doing that. I have a seeds file that I use, so I'm going to bring that up. All right, so these are my default events that I use to seed my database. In this case, I have 3 events: Jane's birthday bash, a work meeting, and then I guess I have a nap event scheduled. Let's create some users, though. So users. So again, as I mentioned, we're going to use the default user object from Django. So that's located in Django contrib auth models, I believe. There we are. Import user. All right, there we are. So we're going to use that user object. Let's create a couple users. So v1 will be user. And actually, I don't really know what user requires. So this is, again, VS Code makes it really easy to kind of investigate what you need. So I'm going to do Control-click and then click Go to Definition here. So this will actually take me to the source file. So I know Chad went over kind of just, peeking into source files. You can actually modify the source files, not recommended, but you do have access to reading all, everything that you're working with. So in this case, it's going to take a look at user. There's not seems to be many fields in here, but I think it's inheriting from here. So yeah, I think the only one I actually care about is just username and password possibly. So let's add that. Oops. Seed file. All right, so user has a username field, I'm pretty sure. And that will be, let's call user 1. And u1.set password, simple password 1. So one thing I want to mention here, in case it's not clear, you can't set the password directly like so. If you did it this way, you would encounter an error because Django has some encryption or some, salting of passwords. So basically, the value you put in here won't actually be what the password would be. This needs to be hashed. So if you use the set password function in this manner, you can set it a clear text password, and then it'll automatically hash it for you correctly. So instead of, again, passing the password parameter directly into the constructor, you want to use a set password method that does some magic behind the scenes to hash your password and get it correct in the database. All right, so I create my user, set password, and then I got to save my user. All right, let's create a few more users that will be named pretty similarly. We'll have user 2, we'll have password 2, and let's create one more user just for good measure. All right, so we have user 3, and there we are. All right, so I'm going to run my seed file. So let's bring up a new terminal, cd into the correct folder, and then clear. All right, so to run my seeds file, again, there's several ways to do this. You could do it directly from the shell. I like typing in VS Code and then using the shell like so, and then feeding in my seeds file. So my seeds file sits right next to my manage.py file, so that's why I can just pass in seeds.py. Give that a run. Hopefully there's no errors. And of course, there's an error. All right, I need to get into my virtual environment. Source, virtual bin activate. All right, I'm in my virtual environment now. cd events. All right. So I'm going to do Python manage.py, and then shell and seeds.py. All right, so I got no errors, so that makes me think that everything seemed to go correctly. Let's actually test my login page now. So I should have a user 1 with password 1 as its login credentials. So let's go back here. So let's try user 1 and password 1. Hopefully that works. Okay, so I got some error. So it seems like I was able to log in. But notice that it's trying to go to accounts/profile once I logged in. So this is where the login redirect parameter will let you control where you actually get navigated to. So in this case, let's go back to my settings file, settings, and I'm going to add a new parameter here. So again, this is all coming from documentation, not stuff that I've really memorized. So if I go back to my documentation, notice there's a login redirect URL. So I'm going to actually take advantage of that. So the default, as you notice, is account/profile. And that's exactly where my web page attempted to navigate to, but I don't have anything defined at that route. So in this case, I'm going to define a login redirect URL. So let's go back here to my settings file, my projects, and I'm going to give it a named route. So in this case, I want to go to my events app, and then I have a named route. So let's go there just to verify. I have an events list in my events app. So to use that named routing, I'm going to do events : and then the name of that route in that app. So it's events list, I think, plural. Yep, events list. So I'm going to save that. All right, I'm going to go back to my web page. Let's log in again. Yeah, continue. All right, so let's log in again. So user 1 and password 1. So log in. All right, notice I actually got, routed to the correct page now. That's because we overrode the default functionality. So the default functionality was to go to some route that's account/profile. In this case, we want to actually go to our events list once we log in. So here, I'm using user 1 because we're logged in. I extract the name, and then these are all the events that I've created. Any questions so far on what we've done to add a login page?
Can you just go back to your VS Code real quick so I can see that page again?
This page right here?
Yes, thank you.
And so these parameters are, again, Django documentation, we kind of point you to it often, but this page contains all the settings you could possibly set. In this case, for the authentication settings, there's a few that you want to focus on. So login URL, this, again, if you want to override the default path, you can do it. And that's how you do it with setting the login URL. Likewise, after you log in, you want to redirect a user to a certain page. You can specify what page to take them to. And similar functionality, when you log out, you can specify where you want to take the user. The default is set to none in that case. So when you log out, you're just going to kind of be, just floating somewhere on some page. I'm not sure what would happen for a log out. All right, so, few steps, and we were able to add a login page. So that's pretty cool. But let's actually enhance this. So we've added a login page, but I'm going to kill my web page. Hopefully that'll clear my session. Let's bring up a new web page. All right, so I'm actually going to go to my events page. All right, looks like I'm still logged in. Let's try to log out then. So if I want to log out, the default path for that would just be log out. All right, so I'm logged out. Let's try going back to my events. I might get an error. All right, so notice my title now says events for, and there's no username here. That's because I'm not logged in. However, we added a login page, but we're not actually forcing the user to log in. So this is, not typical behavior for most websites, right? Like if you go to Amazon, I guess you can access Amazon without, logging in, but you can't see like someone's orders or your orders without logging in. So in this case, we're viewing events, but we never actually force the user to log in. So this might not be, the functionality we want. We want to actually have people log in before we show them events, right? Because like if I create a bunch of events, I don't want Kyle to be able to access all my events without logging in first. So we had a login page, but now we actually want to force our users to actually log in rather than still having access to all of our website without, by circumventing the login page. All right, so any ideas on how we can achieve that? All right, I have one idea. Again, there's several ways to do it. I think Chad went over a method yesterday in the evening about how you can kind of control some access to certain pages or certain routes. So the way I'm going to go about it is using a decorator. And this is something that we've maybe not gone over too much in detail, so I think it'd be a good experience here. So let's go to my views. Again, this is something that you might want to read up on documentation. but Django provides some default decorators that can kind of, I guess, implement functionality that we're looking for. So in this case, I'm going to include from Django contrib auth, and then there's a decorators module, so decorators. And I'm going to import something called login required. Again, this is pre-built functionality. Again, Django gives us a lot of common functionality for us rather than us having to do it ourselves. So this is going to be a decorator that we can use on our functions. So I'm going to add this decorator to my events list, and let's see what happens. So notice right now I'm able to access my event list without actually logging in because I don't have a username here, which means I'm not logged in. I'm simply going to add this decorator, so this @ symbol, and then use the decorator. So login required. So now what this effectively will do is it will prevent us from accessing this page if we're not logged in. And if we actually wanted to check out what login required is doing, we could totally go to the definition. So it's going to take us there. So notice that it's doing some testing. So it's checking for user is authenticated. So that's something we could do ourselves, but login, the login required decorator automatically does that for us. So again, multiple ways to do this. We could code it into our HTML file that if the user is not authenticated, we might show them something different on the page. Or from our backend, we could control what page they actually go to if they're logged in or not logged in. So that's the approach I'm taking here. So again, login required checks if it's authenticated, does some other stuff. So if it's authenticated, I think it calls, let's see. So it seems like user passes test as a function will return a decorator. If the user is logged in, I assume it's going to pass just the function, the actual function you want to call. But if the user pass test is something else, like as in if they're not authenticated, I think actual decorator will point to something else. So that'll probably be a login page or something else that it's going to be used. So let's actually see what happens. So sorry, I got Zoom issues here. All right, so I'm going to close that file. All right, so again, I just added this decorator, login required. That's something that Django provides, and I just added it on top of my event list function. I'm going to save that. My server should automatically refresh. All right, let's try this again. So I'm just going to refresh this page. All right, notice that I refreshed the page, but I've taken to the login page. So let's look at the URL here. The URL is at the login page, but notice it has a next value. So it's going to use this next value. Once I log in, it'll take me back to whatever page I was on or trying to view. So that's, again, all we did was added this decorator, and this took care of that, the functionality for checking if the user's logged in. If they're not, they're redirected to the login page. If they are logged in, then we should be able to access this event page like normal. So let's actually test that out. I'm going to log in here. User 1, password 1, login. All right, so now we're back to the event list page. Notice user 1 is logged in, so we show their username. But yeah, so if I actually want to refresh this page, I'm still on this page because I'm logged in, so I don't get redirected to a login page.
Ankur, what happens if you log out and try to go to like event/1?
Great question. So I'm going to log out by going to logout. All right, I'm logged out. And then the suggestion was, let's go to an event detail. So that's just to make it more clear. We want to go to events and then add events. So I'm going to actually check my database because the way I'm seeding my database, my events kind of get deleted and recreated. So let's get to pSQL. Sorry. Right, clear this. All right, pSQL, my database name is Django event calendar, I think, and underscore new. All right, there we are. All right, so these are all the tables in my database. So all this auth stuff is the stuff that's automatically created through Django. All right, I want to investigate my events, so let's do that. So I'm going to do select star from events event, semicolon. All right, so it looks like my IDs are 6, 7, and 8. Again, this is the way I'm seeding my files. Probably not the best way to seed data. In this case, let's try to go to page 6. So, all right, I'm logged out. I'm going to go to events and then /6. So this should be Jane's birthday bash. Notice it's kind of cached in my Chrome. Should I go there? All right, notice we are able to view that. And the reason is because we've not added a decorator to the detail page. We've only added it to the list page. So again, we're not logged in, but we're able to view details. Again, this is not something we would expect. So that's where I'm gonna actually apply that decorator to all of my functions. So again, my event detail is not using that decorator, so we're able to access it even though we're not logged in. But if we add this to our event detail, and I'm gonna add it to my other methods. So when we create event, you need to be logged in, when you update, and when you delete. All right, so I have this decorator. Again, it's pretty simple. The alternate way to do this is that in each of my functions, I could add something like, if request dot user is authenticated, something like this. I forget if that's a function or not. But if they're authenticated, we could, return what we want to return. Else we could redirect them. So we could do this for every function, but it's a little less, I guess, less seamless, right? Like we gotta add an if statement, we gotta add a redirect. That's gonna be the same. That's probably for each case. Like each case, we want to redirect them to a login page. So it can be done manually, but the decorator just makes it that much more simpler to do it. So instead of writing this if statement and kind of having the functionality repeated in each function, the decorator essentially wraps your function. So again, we've not talked about decorators too much, but essentially what this is doing is wrapping some logic around this entire function so that we can do some checks beforehand or even after the function runs instead of manually writing that logic in there. So I'm gonna get rid of this because I don't need it.
So Ankur, how would you prevent a user from seeing someone else's events?
Great question. So that is something I'm gonna get to. But I'm glad you're thinking of that on that level. So we'll get to that. And if I don't, definitely mention it at the end, please. All right, so we have login required. All right, so I'm gonna save this and then I'm gonna refresh this page. So notice we went to this without being logged in. Now that I refresh, it actually prompts me to log in, but look at my next parameter. Hopefully it's not too small. I don't know if we can blow this up. No, my address bar does not get larger. But if you can't read this, it says events/6. So once I log in, it'll redirect me to a correct page. So if I do user1 and then password 1. All right, great. I'm taking to that event detail, which is Jane's birthday bash. All right, so this is all coming from this decorator. Very easy to add. This is pre-built, so you just gotta include it from Django contrib auth decorators. Login required. Again, this is where documentation, if you're not quite sure what exists or you want more details on it, documentation will kind of be your saving grace there. But for the most part, you just import the decorator and then apply it to whichever functions you want to protect from not from being accessed without logging in.
Can you apply that to the events URL path so you don't have to repeat it for every function?
Events URL path. You mean right here?
Yeah.
I don't believe you can do it here. Don't 100% quote me on that. I've never encountered it, but again, this is where investigation, I'll do a quick Google search on it. I'm not sure. So Django apply decorator to all paths. See what comes up. All right, there's a Stack Overflow. That's usually a good resource. So I want to create a path function. But I think that's what they're asking. Let's see what the answers are. I'm not sure if this is exactly what we want. I'm kind of just scanning this code. I would say might be possible. I am not familiar with it, but that's a great exploration topic for any of you guys that are interested. There might be an easier way to do it. Like if you want to protect all of your pages, all of your routes with just adding a decorator in one spot might definitely be possible. All right, so I'll leave that as a personal research project. But yeah, it's a great question. I don't know offhand if that's possible. All right, so go back to my views again, have these login required. So cool. So I think our website, seems to be working more as we'd like, as in we require a login before we could access any of our pages. So again, if I try to go to my events, I'm logged in as user one, but if I logged out, just to reiterate this, if I log out, I'm logged out. And then let's try going back to events. Nope, can't access it because we got login. So again, just to reiterate, there's multiple ways you can handle this. You could handle this in each HTML page. You could check if the user's authenticated and then show them different content based on the value of is authenticated. Or you can handle it from the back end. I'm not going to say that either way is necessarily better or best. It's kind of up to you, but I would recommend doing it on the back end rather than having logic in your HTML pages that's trying to achieve the same goal. All right, so let's actually make this example a little more detailed. So I know we had a suggestion of, what if you had events created by different users and you want to kind of permission that based on whoever's logged in, and that is something I do want to show. So let's actually change our model a bit. So I'm going to go to my model. All right, so this is our event model. I'm going to add a new field. I'm going to do created by. So this will be a foreign key, and that's going to point to our user model. And we're going to do our on delete business. So in this case, we'll just do models dot cascade. Okay, created by. I have that user already here, so I think I had that from earlier. But basically, you need to import that user model from Django contrib auth models, import user. So sorry, I kind of pre-had that in there. So I'm going to just do it from Django.auth contrib models, and I want to import user. So now that I imported this user, I could have a foreign key to it. So now we have another field here. I'll probably get some issues. Does anyone remember what I need to do if I add a field to my model?
Make a migration.
You need to migrate.
Exactly. Good catch there. So anytime you update your models, your database has to be updated. If you update your URLs or your views, you don't have to update your database, so you don't have to make migrations all the time, but you do have to run it in case your model changes. So in this case, I'm going to do that. So let's go back to my terminal. Python manage.py to make migrations for all my apps. Of course, I get an error. No module name.
I think you just have to switch contrib and off.
Gotcha, thanks. Save that, clear this. Thanks for this. Okay, so this is something you guys maybe have seen before, but anytime you update an existing table, Django's gonna, your database needs to know how to fill in that new column for your existing data. So in this case, I'm gonna actually quit. Let me quit. I'm just gonna drop my database and recreate it. Drop Django event calendar. And I gotta spell stuff correctly. Drop. It's taking a while there. Okay, I need to stop my server. Okay, so my database got dropped. Let's create that database again. Create DB. Django events calendar new. Run that. All right, cool. Got created. Now I want to run my seeds file again. So I'm gonna do Python manage.py. Sorry, I need to make my migrations first. My system is kind of lagging here right now. All right, make migrations. And I'm actually going to delete my migrations I had before, just in case. All right, so I'm going to go into my migrations folder, just deleting what I had before. Delete, and then that. Okay, so it created a model event. I actually got to push this to my database. To do that, do Python manage.py and migrate. So this will actually apply it to my database. Great. Clear this. And I'm going to run my seeds file. So that's Python manage.py shell and then seeds.py. Okay, so I got an error, and that's because I've not specified my new field that I added. So I have these users, and I have these events. Let me get some more real estate here. So these events need a created by item. So I'm going to do created by. Let's say Jane's birthday bash event was created by user 1. Let's say work meeting was also created by user 1. And let's say the nap was scheduled by user 2. Created by U2. All right, so I think that should clean up my errors. So again, we added this created by field. We didn't allow it to be null, so we had to specify a value. If we allowed it to be null, then we wouldn't have to add it manually here. But in this case, I want my events to always have the user that created them. So created by, and let's give this a run. So clear my terminal. All right, running that again. Again, Python manage py shell, and then feeding it my seeds.py. Okay. So the issue there is not deleting my existing data. That was my fault. So we're going to clear all my users out of my database. So just do user objects all delete. Let's try this a third time. Wait, cool. No errors. So I created my users again, created my events again. The only issue, again, the way I'm doing it is that my IDs are going to be not reset. So I'm going to have my IDs are not going to be starting at 0 or starting at 1 because it's basically deleting the entries and reinserting new items with new IDs. All right, so, all right, I have my users, I have my events. Let's go back to my web page just to make sure I haven't broke anything. All right, so let's create a new terminal. Let's go to cd events and then run my server. Python manage.py run server. All right, server is up and running. You should be able to log in. Password 1. Okay, so notice that we actually are showing all events here. nap2 was created by user 2. We can't actually see this right now because I did not add that field in here, but let's actually modify our templates to quickly see that. Go to events, event lists. All right, add it here. So I'm going to add a new span, and the span will show the created whoever created this. So we'll do events.created. That do it.
Does it matter that there's not like spaces on either side of it, like user.username?
I think the spaces in this case are optional. The percentage signs might be a different case. That's a good question, so we could definitely try it. Doesn't hurt to try. But just want to make sure I have this correct. All right, it's created by. So this is a user, and then the user has a username. So we'll do created by. Let's add some styling here quickly. So we'll do color equals 0. Okay, so I added just some display so I can actually see who created which event. So let me save that, and hopefully that applies without issue. All right, so now we have this created by, and notice we could see which user created it. So our first 2 events were created by user 1, as shown there, and then user 2 created our nap events. All right, so the question from before was, well, how do we actually prevent this from happening? As in, I'm logged in as user 1, and by default, we assume that we can only see user 1's events, right? We don't want to show user 1 everyone else's events because that might be private information. So let's actually think about how we can prevent this. So again, as before, there's multiple ways to go about this. One way is to do it in the backend. So that's what I'm actually going to do here. So let's go to my views. And let's investigate my events list. So in this case, I'm getting all my events ordering them by the date, and then passing that to my web page. In this case, we actually want to use the user that's logged in. So I'm going to add in some filtering here. So I'm going to do something like if request dot what is it, user dot is I want to filter my events. So we'll do events dot filter. Again, this is a query set, so I can use the filter method on it. And then for this, I think I need to do something like created by, and that's going to be request.user. So now, since we have our login required decorator, I can know that this user, if we get into this logic, is going to be authenticated. I don't need to manually check it. Like I could check it just to be extra safe. But this login required is going to guarantee that the user is going to have to log in before they could actually, get into this part of our logic. But just to be safe, let's just do a quick check of user is authenticated. All right, so if the user exists, we're going to filter by that user. So I'm actually going to save this. The server rebooted, so that seems good. I'm going to refresh my page. All right, notice that my nap2 or my nap event created by user2 is no longer shown here. The reason is because in the back end, we've filtered out to only get the events created by the current user, which is in this case, request.user is the current logged in user. All right, so again, this could be handled on the I guess the front end, on like the web page could kind of do it. Like if the events user does not match the logged in user, we could kind of hide the data in the web page. So more than one way to go about this. I like doing the logic, if I can, in the back end rather than doing it in my HTML page.
Hey, Encore.
Yep.
If you did it in the HTML, would the data technically be in the user's browser? It's just like hidden or something. Whereas if you're doing it on the server, it's on the server and the data never actually gets delivered at all.
That's a good question. I think normally that could be a concern. But I think the way we're doing it with Django, we're building these templates. So once the web page is processed, I don't think like when the user's actually receiving the web page, it's not going to have access to like your variables or your data. So I'm going to say no, that's not a concern in this case, but it is a good thought. Like usually if it's just a straight up HTML page that we're coding up and we have variables in there, yeah, the user can have access to that data. But in this case, we're using templates. So those templates are actually generating HTML file for us. So that data is not going to be exposed to the end user in that manner.
Gotcha. Cool.
But great question. That is a thought I had also. But yeah, since we only have templates and Django is actually creating HTML pages for us, those templates, whatever data is in that template, is not going to be exposed to the end HTML page. But good thinking. All right, cool. So that's that's better functionality. Can anyone think of a problem here though? I'm gonna kind of let you guys think about this maybe for like 20 seconds. What's the potential issue with our current design?
Can we go to the event by ID for the other person?
You got it, exactly. So I'm gonna need to query my database again because again, my seeding is not the best. So let's do pSQL, Django events. Actually, I guess I don't need to do this. I can just guess it. So if I go to work meeting, notice my ID is 3. I'm guessing my nap event is ID 4. But keep in mind that was created by user 2. So if I do event/4, yep. Notice that I have access to the snap event, even though I'm not logged in as user 2. Keep in mind, this was created by user 2. I should probably have that in the detail page. I didn't add that. But if you just remember, the snap event was created by user 2, but I'm logged in as user 1 right now. So you're right. We're able to access the route still. And the reason is, if we look at our logic, all we're requiring is that someone is logged in. We're not actually checking if that person has access to the correct data that we're getting at. So in this case, we filtered our events in our event list to show only the events for the current user. But that does not prevent me or any user from manually going to the URL that shows event detail. So yep, that is a correct issue with our current design. So let's actually think about how we could improve upon this to actually protect ourselves from showing private data to people that shouldn't be looking at it. So this is where I'm actually going to go into a more complex topic. I don't want to be presenting too much new material for this challenge, but I think it's a good, just a good, I guess, stretch research idea. Again, if you guys don't follow on fully, I just want to make it clear that it is possible to add permissions. It gets a little more technical in terms of how you actually go about it. So if I lose you guys, definitely ask questions, but the key takeaway should be it's possible to add permissioning to users to kind of control what they see. So I'm going to do a few steps here, and then let me know if there's any questions there. So I'm going to introduce, or not introduce, but kind of talk about Django permissions and groups. All right, so there's a whole page on using the Django authentication system. We might have kind of looked at this yesterday, but if you kind of scroll down on the page, there's permissions and authorization, all right? And there's a notion of groups and permissions. So let's talk about what groups and permissions are. You could set a permission on a user directly. So let's say we created a user 1, and we want to like make that user 1 like an admin user, as in they should be able to view everyone else's events. Whereas like user 2 might be a normal user, and they should only be allowed to only view their own events that they created, but not anyone else's. So this is where the idea of permissioning comes in. You can create a specific permission that says view all events for every user, and then give that permission to individual users. But also you can create groups and kind of add permissions to groups and then add users to groups. And that's probably the more typical way to do it. So for example, I might have a group called admin, and then I could add any particular user that I want to that admin group, and they'll inherit the permissions that that admin group has access to. So I think if you kind of read the page, it might give you a good guideline on kind of how to use groups versus using permissions. But I think the high level summary is you generally want to use groups for permissioning, and you want to use specific permissions on users for, I guess, rare cases, or I guess exceptional cases. So a group will define the permissions that users inherit, and then if you need to override that or enhance permissions, you would do it on a one-off basis by adding a permission directly to a user. Otherwise, you want to add permissions to groups, and then you want to add users to groups, if that kind of makes sense there. So let me try to, so again, this is going to require some reading. I'm not going to, manually read the pages here, but I'm going to try to implement this and kind of give you a good idea of how to go about adding permissions groups. So go back to my seed file. Let's add permissions, and we're going to need to add some groups. So let's add a group. All right, so these are built-in models. So that's what I'm going to import here. So I'm going to do group, permission, and I need something called content type. Again, this is all from reading documentation. It's something I had to look up as well. So let's try to do this. All right, so for my permissions, I'm gonna want to delete everything that I have. All right, let's create a new permission. So I'm gonna need something called content type. I'm not gonna be able to fully describe this. It's just something that's required. Objects.get for model. So normally you can have permissions per I guess model that you have in your website. Django actually automatically creates like the basic CRUD permissions, which is add, update, add, read, update, and then delete. But you can create your own permissions also. So events, and then you create a permission. So permission needs a name. So this is name is like a human readable form. So if this permission was shown in like the admin panel, this is what it'll display. So in this case, I'll say view all events. That's the human form. And then code name is actually what you'll use within your code. So in this case, I'll give it a slightly different name. I'm going to call it perm view all events. And then we got to pass it this content type that I just created. So content type. All right. And then let's see. So we got to save that. All right, now I'm going to create a group. So G1 will be a group, and group will have a name. So let's call this group, let's call it G admin. All right, I gotta save that, and then I'm gonna add a permission to it. So G1 has a permission set. I'm gonna add that permission. So if you try to do this before you save it, you're actually gonna get an error. And the reason is because this permissions set is a many-to-many relationship. I could actually prove that by going to the definition of group. So again, I'm diving into Django code. So notice that permissions is a many-to-many field. Since it's a many-to-many, you actually gotta create the group first before you could add permissions to it. Because the permissions isn't actually a value on the group itself. It's in a different join table that joins permissions and groups together in a many relationship. And the reason it's a many-to-many relationship is because one group can have many permissions, and then a single permission can be permission for multiple groups. And that's why it's a many-to-many. So basically, I save my group first, and then I add in the permission first. I'm actually not sure if I need to save this after I add that permission. I think the answer is no, but I'm just going to save it so we can measure. But I have this group, so now I have this admin group that has the permission. Anyone that's a member of this G admin group will have the permission of viewing all events. All right. The last thing I need to do is actually, if I want to permission a user for this group, I'm going to do that for user one. So I'm going to do user one groups. Again, this is a built-in functionality from the user model. So those groups, I guess, set is something that's already created. It's not something I created myself. I'm going to do u1.groups.add. I'm going to add this G1 group to this user. Again, this is the same thing as if I was doing it the other way around, or if I did groups.userset.add user1. You could do it from either direction. All right, so now if I do it this way, again, I don't think I need to save. But let's not save and see what happens. I'm pretty sure since this is a many-many, I don't need to save it. But now user one should be part of the GMN group, and they should have this permission that I just created called perm view all events. All right, but notice user two and user three are not members of this group, so they should not have the permission to view all groups. All right, so let me run my seed file, and then we'll kind of use these permissions. So let's go to this. All right, I'm gonna run my seed file again. All right, no errors, that's a rarity, but it looks like everything got applied correctly. So again, I created a permission, saved it to a database, I applied that permission to a group, and then I added user one to that group, or I added group one to that user, whichever way you wanna kind of think about that. All right, so now user one has this additional group that, that they're a member of, and that group gives user one some additional permissions. So let's actually see how we can use this. I'm gonna go back to my views. And then in my event list, I'm actually gonna see if this user has this permission. So let's say, let's do something like this. I'm gonna create a view all, and that's gonna be a Boolean, and that's gonna investigate if request.user has perm. This is a built-in function. To investigate the perm, you gotta use the app name, so events, and then I think it's dot. Let me double check. Yeah, so you do the app name and then the perm name. So in this case, my perm was perm view all events. Okay, so this is going to check if the current logged in user has this permission. And then if not view all, I guess I don't really need to check this stuff, so I'm just going to get rid of it. All right, so basically what I'm doing here is checking if they have this permission, then view all will be true. If view all is not true, then I want to limit the events that I show to be only limited to the events created by the current user. So I'm going to save this, and let's see if this breaks or actually works. I don't know. My server should be good. All right, so I'm actually going to go back to my event list. Events. All right, I got to log in. User one. Password one, okay. Okay, notice that I have all the events. I have user one events and also user two events, which was that nap event. But is this actually working? Like, this might just be broken from before, as in we're showing all events. Let's actually check out our functionality. So I'm gonna excuse me, log out and then go back to my login page. Now I'm gonna log in as user two. So we go user two. and password 2. All right, notice we're logged in as user 2, and we only see the events that user 2 created. If we want to create a new event, like a fun event, fun, create that. All right, that's created by user 2. Notice that we don't see anything by user 1 or user 3. We only see events by user 2. If I want to go back to my login page, go user 1 and password, what's password 1? Login. All right, there we go. We see that newly created event, which is created by user 2, which we just created, but we can see all of them. This is because user 1 has been added to a group called admin, and that admin group has permission to view all events.
So question on that. You did the permissions only in the seed file, but I also saw somewhere in the admin page that you can do groups and permission. Can you create groups and permission, custom groups and permissions in the admin page also?
Great question. I've actually not done that, but I think the answer is yes. So let's actually investigate it. I'm not going to spend too much time because I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, but let's try it. So I'm going to create a super user. So Python manage.py create super user. We'll call the super user admin. Okay, so my super user got created. So let's see if we could use our admin panel. You are
said the password was too short.
Yeah.
Was that an error or just a warning?
It was a warning. So it asked me bypass password validation, create user anyway. So yeah, Django will try to protect you, but in this case, when you create a super user, you can kind of subvert the password requirements. So I'm going to log in. Okay, so notice again, we have our events. That's our custom model that has, you know, what we created. Notice that we're only seeing event object 8 here. Can someone quickly tell me why I'm seeing event object 8 as opposed to something that's more friendly?
String
Because you
method
didn't add a dunder string.
You got it. Yep, I did not have a dunder string method in my model. So if I go quickly to my models, notice there's no dunder string method. So in this case, it's not going to be able to display something that's readable. So let's quickly add that and see what happens. So string self, we got to return a string. That would be, let's just do self.name. I'm not sure if I need to migrate actually. Nope, that's not what I want because I need
The curly braces are on. Yeah.
All right, so simple addition, and I crashed my server. That's how I expected. Not sure what's going on there. Do I need to log in? Okay, I don't know what happened
your
there.
model and didn't migrate.
Yeah, so I think for adding a method, I don't have to migrate because it seemed to update now. So I'm not sure what that error was from. But yeah, usually when you do update your model, you will have to migrate. In this case, since I didn't add a field, I just added a method. Migration was not required. So it looks like, you know, I added my str method and now we actually see the events. So that's great. So yeah, nothing too interesting here. It just shows you your data, but let's actually go back to our groups and users. So if I go to my groups, gadmin, so permissions. So shows me permissions. Can I create permissions here? So I'm not sure how to add permissions actually. I could add new groups, I could add new users, but I'm not sure how I can manually add permissions. Does anyone happen to know how to do that through admin panel? It might be possible, but again, I've never done it through the admin panel. So I'm gonna say likely possible, but I'm not quite sure how to do it. You might have to add another.
Yeah, you can just hit the add button there for groups.
Right, but I guess the question was how to add new permissions. So I could add existing permissions. So like I created this view all events permission, and now I could add that to new groups. But if I wanted to actually add a new permission, like I create a brand new permission, I'm not sure how I would actually go about doing that. But might be possible. Again, you might have to like include the permissions model, and maybe you could do it that way. Again, I've not done it. So
yeah, I think that's it actually.
Okay, yeah, so it's possible. I've not done it, so I don't want to waste too much time trying to figure it out. But again, definitely a good self-research project or self-investigation. But yeah, okay, cool. So I've added that. Can anyone think of a problem with my current functionality? Let's go back to events. Okay, so I'm logged in as admin. I actually want to be logged in as user one. So admin is a super user, so they're by default they get every permission automatically. So that's why admin is able to view all items. But okay, I'm logged in as user one. I can see all events. Let me log in as user two.
Is it that you can still see if you look up by event ID?
You got it.
Yeah.
So password 2. Okay, so notice I can only technically see 2 listed events. Let's go to nap. But what if I actually manually went to event 6? Notice I'm logged in. So our previous check was only checking if you're logged in. It's not actually checking who's logged in to view the detail. That's why it's still kind of broken in that work meeting was an event created by user 1, but user 2 can manually go to that URL and still investigate it. All right, so let's quickly figure out how to fix this, and then we'll wrap up this example. I know we're running a little long. Apologies for kind of lapsing on break here. Almost done here. All right, so let's kind of think about how to fix this. So this is another, I guess, more advanced topic that I'm going to kind of present just to show you that it's possible. Again, if there's any questions, we could talk one-on-one about it, or if there's any general questions, definitely can try to answer them here. Let's actually do something a little more complex. So I'm actually going to create a brand new file in my app. So my events app, create a new file. I'm going to call it, validator.py. I don't know if that's what I want to call it. In here, I'm going to create a function called check perms. And this will take in function. And I'll talk about what I'm adding here. It is kind of complex, so basically I'm creating a custom decorator that I can add on to my existing routes that I've defined before. So in this case, request would be arg0, I believe, and then if all right, so it's a little different. So let's go. All right, so again, I'll try to explain what I'm doing here. It is something complex and something that I've not done often. So all right, so I'm nesting a bunch of functions. So that's going to be something weird. That's something that we've not done before. Basically, I'm creating a decorator where I could actually pass in a parameter. So that's why I have this here. Check perms is going to be a decorator that takes in a parameter that I'm going to pass in. Then I'm going to have a nested decorator in that takes in a function. And then inside of that, I'm going to create another function that takes in the parameters for that function. So again, a lot of functions that I just mentioned. I'm just going to code this up, and then we'll talk about it after that. So in this case, I'm going to check request, which is going to be an argument that's passed to our initial function. And then I'm going to do request.user, and let's see. So here. All right. So user dot if. All right, I need to get the event. So to get the event, how do I get the event? Okay, we'll go events ID equals var. This is the way I want to do it. Sorry, I'm trying to put this up here. Event.objects.get. All right, so we want to get an event. This is going to be for the event detail. So we want to actually get a particular event. And if we look at our event detail route, so I'm going to go to views. It takes in a request and event ID. So I could actually use this event or check this event ID and try to get an event for it. So in this case, I'm going to go to, let's see, validator. And then in this case, I'll do ID equals quarks events ID. And if that. All right, so basically I'm using the arguments and trying to investigate the events that we're dealing with so that I could see if this user can actually view it. So in quarks, else none. All right, so we have a valid user. What do we want to do here? All right, so in this case, if we want to do something like if request.user equals event dot created by. So again, created by is a user, and then our request.user is the user that's logged in. So if they match, we want to allow viewing the data. So in this case, we'll return function, and we'll pass it the args that it requires. So it's args and quarks. All right, so basically this return is actually going to call my event detail function. So that's, again, this, we're going to add a decorator here. So let me actually go about doing that so we can understand what I'm trying to do here. So check perms is going to be a decorator that I want to add. So let's go to my views. I'm going to have to import that. So from events.validator, import has perm, check perms. All right, so check perms is a decorator I could use. So I'm going to add that to my event detail. All right, so I have multiple decorators here. It's going to check login required. If that passes, it's going to go to check perms. So check perms will pass this in as an argument. So event detail is the function right here that's being passed as an argument. So in this case, I'll return else. Let's say is, if the user does not match the current event or created by user, I'm going to let's raise an exception. So again, this is additional functionality that Django provides from Django.core.exceptions, import permission denied. So this is going to raise a 403 error. If you're familiar with HTTP errors, so I'm going to raise permission denied. All right, that looks good. Okay, so this is the case, again, if the current user has created the event, they should be able to view it. But we also have that additional case where we have that permission called view all events. And we want to see if we have a user that has that permission. So if that is the case, we want to do user.user. So request.user has perm. Again, this is similar to what we did before. Sorry. To go to views, again, the same thing we did for our event list. We used has perm, so I'm going to actually copy that there. Go back to my validator and check it here. All right, so if the user created the event or the current user has this view all perms, we want to just do the default function call. Otherwise, we want to do a permission denied error. So if I did that correctly, all right, I think that should be all I needed. Let's actually test this out before we look at the code a little more closely. So, all right, got an event. Oh, okay, so I need to check a perm here. So in this case, events dot that's one of the errors I had. So basically, I'm specifying what perm through the decorator, and then I'm using that perm here. So I'm not hard coding it. As in, if I wanted to check a different perm in a different function, I could do that with this decorator. So in this case, let's see if this works. The event is not defined. Great. Event is not defined. Okay. Make sure I don't need anything else. Okay, let's see if this works. Or it's not. A couple typos. And that's what we're doing. Okay, cool. So I think I got it working. Let's verify and then we'll wrap this up. So login, let's go user2, password 2. Okay, so I'm logged in as user2. And so like before, I'm gonna try to navigate to event 6, which event 6 should not be accessible by user2. Notice I get a 403 forbidden error. And this is coming from this permission denied exception. Django will handle that and show a 403 error on your web page. So the reason, again, this happened is because request.user did not match event.created by user. So in this case, this check failed. Then we move on to the second check. The second check is, does this user have a permission that we specified? So that perm that we specified, if I go back to my views, was, do they have this perm view all events? In this case, user 2 does not have that, so they cannot view that event. But if we log in as user 1, so let me do a quick login for user 1. User 1, again, user 1 is our admin user that we gave permissions for. Okay, so notice that we have access, we can view all, and like if we manually go to some other event, so event 7 should be our nap event. Yep, we can still view it. So in this case, again, just looking at our logic, our request.user does not match our event.created by for our nap event, but we still have that permission to view all events. So that's why we're still able to access that page. All right, so I just wanted to kind of go over the ability to create your custom decorators. So this is essentially, we used a built-in decorator called login required. We could easily implement that ourselves. It would be pretty simple. Just we'd check if the user is authenticated, we'd let them proceed to access the function or access the route. If they're not logged in, we could redirect them to a login page. So that's essentially what login required is doing for us. But we could, again, create custom functionality through other decorators. So in this case, creating this decorator just saves us from having to do this multiple times. So, if we want to apply that to our create, or not create, because you create, but updating, like you shouldn't be able to update an event that you didn't create. Also, you shouldn't be able to delete an event that you didn't create. So in this case, we could simply add this line to our delete and our update routes, and that'll kind of automatically give us that functionality that we implemented. Any questions on kind of what we ran through there? Again, I know that was new information. The key takeaway is it is possible to create your own custom permissions and kind of create your own custom decorators to easily apply that functionality to whatever routes you want to. Any questions?
Not a question, but to do what Brian was saying earlier, you need to do in your models from Django.contrib import admin and then admin.site.register and then in parentheses permission, and that you can manually create permissions in the admin page.
Gotcha. Yeah. Again, I've not done that, but thank you for looking that up. So I think the suggestion was do something like this: permission, and then you got to import whatever you're trying to adjust. And yeah, so this will make it easier to add the contrib models import permission. All right, I'm just gonna give this a quick try and then we'll wrap this up. So save that. Go to my admin panel. Yep, there we go, permissions. So notice that the one we created already is already in our table. That's that view all events. This is something we created, but you can create new permissions now and kind of add that to groups and users for your admin panel. So yeah, thanks for looking that up. That was a good suggestion. But yeah, kind of mess around with it. Again, permissioning is something that is pretty important to having a functional website. So Django makes it pretty easy to implement it onto our existing pages.
For something small like this, can you just apply permission to a user, or do they have to be assigned to a group first?
Nope, you could do it directly to a user. I think just the typical advice is try to create groups and add users to groups, but you could add a permission directly to a user if you wanted. So that permission I created that added to a group, I could just there's a way to do it. Let me quickly show that. So let me go to my seeds file. I could do something like U1, and they have a permission set, I believe. User permissions, I think, is the one you want to add to. I could do something like add P1, which is my permission. So groups is a predefined set, and then user permissions is a predefined set also. So yeah, you could add permissions directly to a user. I'm not going to say it's wrong. It's case-by-case basis. Usually you want to use groups as opposed to certain permissions because, you know, let's say I add a new permission, like a new capability in my website where I want admins to be able to delete all events with one click. Like I'd add a new permission that's called delete all. And the only thing I would need to do is add it to that group rather than add it to, like, you know, my 15 admins that I might potentially have. All right, with that, I'm going to stop the recording here.